Hey everyone, Cinephile Mike here, and today I am joined by filmmaker, musician, and director Benjamin Wagner. His latest documentary, Friends and Neighbors, explores how chronic stress and trauma are shaping everyday life in America and how connection might be our most powerful path toward healing. The film's going to be premiering on PBS this May, and it's especially timely as we head into Mental Health Awareness Month. Benjamin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, man. Thrilled to be here. Thank you.
So, in putting this together, you're weaving your own story with experts and community voices. Was there
Yeah.
a moment during filming this that shifted how you personally understood stress or trauma?
Oh man, like every moment and continues. I mean, I learned something, Mike. I'm now working on a book, um, uh, not quite version, but like a sort of deeper dive, you know. So I learned something every single day. But the biggest epiphanies came or insights came really early in the making when I learned about the basic physiology of stress and trauma, which I do in this kind of like little animation bits, this little explainers. To me, that was a eye opener. Like, you're kind of aware in concept of what stress is. Maybe you've heard of fight or flight, but frankly, I didn't think it applied to me. It didn't occur to me that, well, there's a chronic stress that adds up over time. It didn't really occur to me that there was a legacy of these things that happened to me as a young man that were stuck in me, if you will. So like the physiology was massive to learn. There's science here, and it's not hippy dippy stuff. It's like research based, evidence based. Doctors talk about it, right? Like Dr. Zachary Mulvihill talks about it, like
Yeah.
it's a real thing. So, but it was just one insight after another, to be fair.
And it's such a personal story you share. I'm curious, were there moments as you were putting this together where it felt overwhelming and you questioned whether or not to finish this?
It's funny. I mean, I kind of feel that way right now. Like there's part of me, as particularly as it goes wide, because I've been screening it periodically on and off for a couple of years at festivals and stuff. As you build towards the PBS thing, and every time you're kind of like, I mean, the first time, dude, was like, oh, was this a good idea or not? But what you find every single time is there's a line of people afterwards who want to talk. And mostly they want to unburden themselves with whatever is they've been carrying. And maybe it's something they talk about all the time, and maybe it's something they haven't told anyone at all. And like I knew enough from Fred's modeling, if you will, Mr. Rogers' modeling, like
Yeah.
that I had a suspicion, and Sarah McBride talks about it in the film, right? That when we are vulnerable, we give others permission to be vulnerable, right? Like so, like I just intuited I was going to be a proxy for guys who, mostly guys who look like you and me, man, because certain communities, people of color, women have had to be out front on this stuff because they've had to be. And men relate to the party outside of, I would say, combat veterans, first responders, that sort of thing, right? Where it's so largely, increasingly socially acceptable, but it's just got such stigma. And it didn't occur to me that, like, there's like a bell curve, right? And most of the
Yeah.
stories we know are on the edge of the bell curve. But like, it just was so clear to me as soon as this therapist said to me, well, it sounds like you have post-traumatic stress. I was like, wait, what? Me? But as soon as he explained it, I was like, oh, I'm just like average dude with the average, and careful not to compare, right? But average dude with just an average set of adverse childhood experiences and a
Mhm.
pretty stressful job. And it just occurred to me that if I could do this, then
Mhm.
maybe it could help other people to do it. And luckily, it's borne out every time we show it. And every time it airs, you get an email, just like Mr. Rogers and me, or notes from people. So that's the hope. But man, I feel trepidatious all the time about it. Like, really? Are we sure this is a good idea? You know what I mean?
And you bring up an interesting point. So I'm curious, in your opinion, right? Because the film highlights how people are overwhelmed and disconnected, and different groups of people, right? Will or will not talk about this. Why do you think, even in today's day and age, people still struggle so openly to talk about mental health?
Um, I mean, this is actually what largely what the book's about. It's called Strong and Silent, and it's really a narrower, deep dive on men, because men in particular, and listen, I've only been a man, right? So I can only answer from my perspective. Um, but like we have these cultural norms, right? And the cultural norms are, John Wayne, John McClane, John Wick, right? Like, and none of
All
those
the
guys.
Johns.
I mean, yeah. I mean, John Wick, to his credit, gets emotional about the puppy, which is
Yeah.
great and like one of the most reliable tropes in cinema there is, right? And you'll note there is a puppy in Friends and Neighbors,
Yes,
not an
there is.
accident, Mike. But like, it's cultural norms, man. Like, it's stigma, cultural norms, and this idea of bootstraps. Like, we're supposed to pull ourselves up by our street, like the rugged individual, like this American myth. And I think it does us I know it does a tremendous disservice to all of us and to men in particular. Men are like 4 times more likely to commit suicide. We're far less likely to seek help just for regular medical stuff, let alone mental health stuff. And well, you may be young enough not to be considering this stuff, but I'm increasingly aware of the fact that, men don't live as long as women.
Yep.
And this is all causal stuff. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I really found powerful about Dr. Filletti's the adverse childhood experiences study is you begin to see this direct correlation between what happens, how you manage it, and what the health outcomes are in a way that really hadn't been demonstrated before. And generationally, I missed it wholesale because it was like after I was a kid. And unless you're a psychologist, you're probably not playing along.
And talking about, these powerful moments and these reveals, there was one image in the film that kept repeating that I want to ask you about
Yeah.
because it's also on your poster. That
Yeah.
photo of you in the backwards cap.
Yeah.
What does that image represent for you now?
I appreciate your noticing that. My dad took the picture. There's 3 of them. It was a couple of months after my parents divorced. My dad stayed in our house. My mom moved us out to an apartment and we were visiting him. It would be like cable was new. We would watch HBO when HBO was new and he'd make a thing of Gino's pizza rolls. It was that kind of like bachelor dad, couple of not even teenage boys. Um, and I mean, to me, I actually have the poster right here on the floor, framed. To me, there's a look in my eyes. Like I know how sad I was. And that is part of what makes it so powerful. The other really interesting note, and I really appreciate Mike, you noticing this, is the baseball cap is, there was this thing, I'm a Gen X kid, so this is like, I guess early 80s, like 80, 81. There were these hats that had like stuff, like stuffed things, like sewn into them. So they're Mercury wings. And Mercury like runs, right? Like
Yeah.
that, like, the sort of profile, like the FTD Flowers guy, that's Mercury, right? And if you think about what happens in fight or flight, you run. You
Yes.
might fight, but mostly you freeze or you run. So it's an accident. I mean, I clearly wasn't thinking about fight or flight as a 9-year-old. And I
Hmm.
clearly wasn't considering who Mercury was in the scheme of some larger storytelling rubric.
Right.
But in retrospect, as an adult, I always loved the hat. I always loved that image. And it just says it's the whole story's in there. If you're as smart as you are to double click into it. Because what do you do in fight or flight? You try and disappear, dude.
Hmm.
Like you hide under the stairs. I mean, run down the street at top speed. Later you might drink too many beers or take a couple of Xanax, like whatever the thing is, it's almost all about getting smaller and hiding and becoming invisible. And at a certain point in my life, I was like, that's no way to live. I want to be here in my body, in my life, 110%, for my kids, with my wife, for Mike, with whom I'm talking right now. You know what I mean? So to me, that moment is the point where I just started trying to figure out how to escape what was ultimately profoundly painful. But we don't like that kind of pain, we're not allowed to actually talk about, right? To your previous question, it's not like it was a cut or a bruise. But I can tell you it was way more painful than any other pain I've ever felt, even my jaw being broken, which was pretty painful. So I appreciate you noticing it. It's an important picture to me.
And speaking of the pain and how you go into, your parents' divorce, You have really deep personal conversations with both of them in this documentary. How did
Yeah.
you go about approaching those interviews both as a filmmaker and as a son?
Well, I mean, I luckily had lots of practice with interviewing mostly artists. They also know me well enough to know that, that we were going to go there. And that was like the design, that was the objective. The objective was to unearth the hard stuff in an effort to begin to resolve it. They knew I was dealing with anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress. I told them all that stuff. Um, Oddly enough, my mom says in the movie, right, well, I figured you were smoking pot, but I didn't know what else you were doing. And you're like, like, I wish you had said something when I was 14 or 15 or whatever that was. You know what I mean? Um,
Could have helped, Mom.
well, so yeah, I mean, so I think I mean, I've been making records where I kind of wear my heart on my sleeve since I was 15, right? So like or blogging for those of us who remember what that word means. So like they know that I've always had a sort of, it's like a publicly expressive part of me, but it's the public part wasn't important. It's just that's where I worked it out. So like the answer to your question is I knew I had to, and so in the moment where I had to ask my dad about the domestic abuse and where I had to ask my mom about the infidelity. I knew I had to ask.
Yeah.
And I knew that they had the right to answer it however they wished or not. Um, but I felt a responsibility. I'll tell you, Mike, since you asked, and it connects to that picture. My friend Ann Kavitsky, who's in the movie, the Look for the Good founder, she said to me after she saw the movie, she goes, so there's this idea in one form of psychology called parts work, where you identify different parts of your internal experience and kind of work through whatever happened to that part, right? And she goes, it's really remarkable the degree to which you stuck up for that little boy.
Mhm.
And so I think that little boy is who gave me the courage to be like, wait a second, we are not going to act like nothing happened here, you know? Because it doesn't need to be the whole story. And it doesn't need to be, but it also doesn't need to be stuck in us and acting on us every time. Like my mom and dad would come together very rarely, and it would be massively uncomfortable for everybody. Like it didn't have to be that way. So I think they came through because they wanted to push through it as much as I did, to be honest. But moreover, because I think they knew it could help, it could pay forward, it could provide healing for other people who are like, I don't think there's much unusual um, about our story. The thing that differentiates it from most stories is we actually got into the sort of ramifications, the consequences, the implications, the sort of somatic dynamics. In other words, what happens to your body as a result, is as well as your brain. Whereas mostly you just see the chaos. Like most stories are just drama, 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 but no explainer. And I was really interested in the what happened, what does it mean, what bearing did it have on us, and how can we learn from it? So again, that it was hard. It was uncomfortable, wildly uncomfortable, Mike. It was wildly uncomfortable. Like, take a deep breath, have your notes prepared, and let the chips fall.
And I know I have to let you go soon, and I could talk to you for hours on this topic, and I feel like I have so many more questions I could get into.
Oh,
So I'm
thanks,
gonna
man. Likewise.
I'm gonna kind of try to combine my last two into one. Um, but in addition to directing this, you didn't just direct this, but you also composed the music. And you even talked about how you write albums where you wear your heart on your sleeve.
Yeah.
How did you think about using music as part of the emotional storytelling? And how do you want that to kind of maybe shape what audiences take from the film?
Well, the fact is, the music, the way I think of it is, and the reason I insisted on keeping the music, not just in the documentary, which is easy because I directed it, but in the book to my editor, I'm like, no, no, you got to keep it in there because the music was the primary place where it kind of leaked out of me, the pain. Like, like creative, I'm sure you're a creative person just by talking to you. Like, when you make stuff, it comes from a place that doesn't have the same language as we're using right now. And for me, if I'm doing it right, whatever it is, including making this, like it addresses the stuff that's tucked away and not fully formed. And so the very first thing I did, as I was leaving Facebook and reckoning with this diagnosis and trying to frankly get my SHIT together, was I was working on a new record. And there was a song, the instrumental version is in there called Breaking Down. And the lyric went, I'm driving down to Carolina, gonna try and settle down, put away these daily benders, put away these ways I've found. And I was like, these daily benders, right? I was like, well, if I say that, then everybody knows that. And they weren't benders, it's hyperbole, Mike, but it didn't matter. It felt like that. Three, four beers was two, three more than I thought I should be having every day for 20 years. But the music made, I just said to myself in my head, I was like, well, if you're going to sing that lyric, you got to be able to say that lyric. You got to be able to live with that lyric. And you have to say the hard part. Like it was just like this voice in my head. I guess maybe it was Fred Rogers. Maybe it's that little boy. Maybe it's my parents. Maybe it's a blend of all of them. Maybe it's my authentic self. I don't know. But it was like, you got to tell the truth. And so the music and Crash Site was the same. That's why that lyric's in there, leave my body where it was found. Like I didn't know Bessel van der Kolk's Body Keeps the Score in 2001 or 2000 when I wrote it. Like no idea. But the idea that the language of creative language was leading me where I needed to go, that's why I kept it in there. And same with that song I sing at the Iowa State Fair, Tear the Curtains Down, Throw the Windows Wide. I just felt like I had to go public. And I don't mean with PBS viewers, I meant like with the people in my life that I care about. Like I had to tell the truth because I felt like I wasn't being honest with me or with them. And so to your question, the music is what got me there, dude. So like, and my brother, who I've been working with forever, and both of a lot of his work was at MTV, in some cases MTV News, but more broadly. So he's been cutting to music his whole career. So I gave him the stems of all these of this record, which is called Constellations. And so all these musical bits are all of the assemblages, all the elements from all these songs that were in essence the record that were like me saying to myself, you got to tell the truth. You got to talk about this stuff. It's going to be hard. It's going to be messy. And I'll tell you this as a last bit, the song Wherever You Go is the song that it begins, that kind of atmospheric sound. And then the song that ends is called Wherever You Go. And that's really, it's on Constellations. It's the last song. You don't hear it all put together, but there's pieces of it throughout until the very end of the movie, which again, you know enough about cinema to know, like you can imagine like, oh, we're going to use the parts and then we're going to pay it off, in the finale, and it builds and it builds and builds and we breathe and it's over. So it was just all part of the organic construction of the thing. But to me, it's a critical through line.
Nice. Well, Benjamin, thank you again so much for taking the time to chat with me. It's a beautiful film. Thank you for sharing your story. Friends and
Thanks,
Neighbors
man.
will be available on PBS as well as on demand through Apple and Amazon starting on May 1st. We'll include the links in the episode notes here. Please make sure to check it out. And as always, if you enjoyed this conversation with Benjamin and me, please make sure you subscribe to the channel for more filmmaker interviews like this and other spoiler-free content related to award season, festivals. It's all here on Cinephile. Mike, Benjamin, have a great day. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
man. Really appreciate it.